Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. My name is Matt Knight, and I will be your host this week. And I am joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and feature editor, Jennifer from Eco Cahill. Welcome.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. We're Daveless again this week. You'll just have to take potluck.
Appreciate you sitting in.
Well, like I was said to somebody earlier, it's why I get the big nonprofit dollars.
So big.
That's right. Yeah. So I think we should just crack on as opposed to diving in. I'm not sure which hurts worse, but we'll decide that later. So Thad, why don't you tell us what's on the cover of the North Coast Journal this week?
Yeah, this week we have a strong story by Elaine Weinreb, our regular freelancer, who jumped into the world of the Arcata Fire Protection District and some of its concerns with some plans coming down the pike.
Yeah, there's been like a lot of local fire news having to do with shortfalls lately. I also noticed a story from one of your competing outlets about a staffing shortage at Humboldt Bay Fire. So this seems to be a trend.
It is, and I think it's a trend that we're seeing across a lot of sectors, including law enforcement and lots, and that it's there's both budget constraints, but then there's also just agencies are having a hard time recruiting and retaining people to fill these jobs, which is concerning. So Arcata Fire Protection District, I think some folks might remember, there was a ballot measure to pass a property tax back, I think in 2020, that was kind of hotly contested and actually passed. And so Arcata Fire has been kind of eking by on a slim budget, and those property tax assessment dollars are just kicking in. So they're actually getting a little bit of a funding boost. And they're able to hire a couple more firefighters, which will enable them to staff all three of their stations. I think a lot of people, when they hear Arcata Fire, think just Arcata, when in fact Arcata Fire covers Arcata, McKinleyville, and then as far down as the Indianola Cutoff, and as far east as Fieldbrook, and even out to the Samoa Peninsula. So they cover two of the three largest population centers in Humboldt County, and then the university and a bunch of adjacent lands. So the concern of the fire department is that they're happy to be getting back to approaching full staffing, but their concern is that they have equipment that is aging out and not funds on hand to replace it. Fire trucks are crazy expensive. I don't know if you guys knew this, but like upwards of $1 million to replace a ladder truck. Wow. Which is insane. Yeah. But then what the article really focuses on, which is kind of their larger concern, is that there's some big things brewing in Arcata and at Cal Poly Humboldt that are really going to change the face of the community, and by changing the face of the community are going to change what Arcata Fire Protection District is responsible for. So for instance, the Arcata, the city is contemplating the Gateway Plan, which is still in early planning phases. It's probably going to go to the Planning Commission and the City Council later this year, but city staff is, proposing potentially building, concentrated infill development that would result in up to 7-story apartment buildings. And so Arcata Fire Protection District is kind of like, not only is this potentially going to add, I think the estimate is 9,000 new residents to Arcata over the next 20 years, which is just a lot more people. But also some really big structures that Arcata Fire Protection District has concerns about whether it has the capacity to really fight a fire should there be one in one of these large structures. And then similarly, Cal Poly Humboldt, has announced plans to double its student enrollment over the next 7 years, which would add another, I think, 5,500 students to campus. But then also to really develop, have some big infrastructure problems on campus and off, from new classroom buildings to resident housing. Or student housing, I'm sorry, like the Craftsman's Mall project, which is slated to break ground, I think, later this year, is right across from campus, but it's going to be, I think, an 800-bed housing complex. So Arcata Fire is just kind of saying, like, we need to be at the table for these conversations if you expect us to keep this community safe moving forward.
Now, is it fair to say that it's sort of an open question as to whether the university has stepped up to the plate and is going to contribute, or has been, or will be contributing to supporting all this added population and work for the fire department?
That is definitely a fair question at this point. I think that I don't remember exactly who was in the story, whether it was the fire district board president or one of the command staff. Somebody said they're scheduled to meet with the university to talk further this month, but they certainly haven't kind of gotten any real strong ongoing funding commitments from the university. Although I think the university has indicated that it does contribute in some fashion. But there's, part of the issue with the university is that it's the fire protection district is funded through property tax assessments. And so there's limitations on the ways that Cal Poly Humboldt can contribute directly to the district. So for instance, there's been a lot of reporting about, I think it's 350, it might even be $450 million that was allocated to Cal Poly Humboldt in the state budget for these infrastructure projects. Well, they're kind of statutorily bound not to turn any of that money over to a fire protection district. So even if the university wanted to, it would be illegal for them to kind of contribute some of that funding. And then there's the issue with any off-campus development. If they purchase a property and development, it takes that property off the property tax rolls. And so not only are they not contributing directly, but then that's actually taking funding away from the district. So clearly something's going to have to give there. And it sounds like there is progress toward at least having a conversation about what that might be between the district and the university. But so far, there's no agreement, even as the university is barreling forward very quickly with its plans.
Well, it is a great and detailed story, and I encourage people to pick it up and give it a really good read. We've got a lot of ground to cover, though, today, so let's just move on to the next thing, which kind of segues from one Cal Poly story to another, which is the Cal Poly paying triple for 16 acres in the Arcata Bottom, and sort of snaking it away from, well, maybe that's not a good word, but outbidding another nonprofit who had had an agreement of some sort to purchase the property.
Yeah, so this is another kind of in-depth one that I really encourage everybody to read, because we're just going to be able to go over kind of the highlights. But yeah, Kim Weir has a story in this week's edition that Cal Poly Humboldt, recently it was announced last month that Cal Poly purchased this property in the Arcata Bottoms, and it kind of came out of nowhere. The property isn't on their master plan, didn't appear on kind of any of the infrastructure roadmaps that they put out kind of after getting the Cal Poly designation and all that new funding. And it just so happens this was a property that had been in the city of Arcata's plans, and had been very much in the plans of a local nonprofit, Life Plan Humboldt, which had been it entered into a non-binding agreement with the property owner to purchase this property and develop it into a kind of an alternative senior housing community, an age-in-place community, which kind of, at least proponents say, kind of is desperately needed in the area. And we don't know a lot about kind of how this purchase came together, but what we know is that after it was announced that Cal Poly Humboldt was going to be the state's third polytechnic university and going to get all this new funding, it sounds like the property owner, according to the university, the property owner approached the university and kind of said, "Hey, I've got this property if you're interested." And from there, things moved really quickly. And within 3 months, the property owner had kind of pulled away from the agreement with the nonprofit, and had agreed to sell the property to Cal Poly Humboldt for nearly double the price that had been offered by the nonprofit, and for apparently triple what the property was assessed at. And this thing seems to have moved so quickly that when Cal Poly made the purchase offer, it didn't include an assessment or a.
I was just going to say, it's a question as to whether they did due diligence in this purchase. Is that fair to say, or?
I mean, it's fair. The spokesperson for the university said that they went through the normal due diligence process. It appears to have moved very quickly, is what I'll say. The final due diligence report wasn't completed until the day before the purchase went through. So again, things seem to have moved very quickly.
Got it. Well, that's another story that I think people should dive in and really get into the weeds on. Yet there's even more. This is just a jam-packed book this week.
It really is.
We have a piece from Jerry Rohde, and also one about the Planning Commission, and also Klamath Dam removal. You want to just kind of skim those for us?
Yeah, so real quick, the piece by Jerry Rohde and then another views piece by Tamara McFarland were both written and sent to us in response to our coverage last week of some stuff that happened at the Humboldt County Planning Commission meeting on August 18th, in which the commission chair made some comments that local tribes, specifically the Wiyot tribe and the Blue Lake Rancheria, found deeply offensive about a local developer's efforts to build a home on some culturally sensitive property in near Bayside. And so I encourage people to check them both out. Jerry is a local historian, and his piece is very much just looking at the way when Humboldt County was settled, quote unquote, that it was really a concerted effort of white people to both marginalize and murder Native people, but then also to take their land. And so by the time Natives were allowed off of local reservations, all of their land had been taken. And so the piece is headlined, "This is their land," and it is very much I'd say an urging of a local historian to see, for people in present day things like the Planning Commission, to see the historical context behind land use decisions. And then Tamara McFarland's piece is very much looking at just kind of what average people can do in light of this history. And she has a couple very tangible suggestions for folks who are troubled by the history of this area, including contributing a Wiyot honor tax, which is a portion of their income to the Wiyot tribe, to even bequeathing property owners to bequeath their properties to the tribe after they pass away. And I was going to hit the Klamath Dam story.
Yes.
It's the last in the news section. Again, very packed issue this week. But we got some much needed good news on the Klamath River, which has just been a steady stream of really sad news lately. But the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, which has the final say over dam removal, its staff basically completed a final environmental review of the dam removal project, is recommending that the commission meet later this year to fully approve it, which would clear the way for these dams to be out of that river next year, which is really exciting news for anybody who's been following that closely.
Yeah, it has been sort of a tennis match, hasn't it, back and forth for the last few years, whether is it going to be removed, is it not going to be removed, and it just kind of bounces back and forth. But this seems like it's headed towards that.
It really does. I mean, I've been writing about dam removal on the Klamath River since 2010 when the first agreement was reached. And it has seen all kinds of setbacks. So many, I will never, ever say it's a done deal until dams are no longer in that river. But it, by all means, seems like there is a momentum and a newfound really desire by all parties to get those things out. A
path forward, as they say.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
It's actually very tempting to just head down there with a truck and a cable and pull them down myself, just to free Thad of this.
What kind of truck? What kind of truck are you driving now, Jen?
I don't know. How do trucks work?
Well, thanks for covering all of those things in the journal. There's just a lot of great information for people to pick up and dive into. But now we're going to switch gears and go over to the arts and features section, and that is your cue, Jennifer, to talk about Chile.
Yeah, while Thad was in the trenches, I was under the grandstands over at the Humboldt County Fair. The chili cook-off was going. Now, typically, the Fortuna Rodeo has a chili cook-off. And every year, except for when it was stalled in the pandemic, the Big Brothers Big Sisters of the North Coast has its chili cook-off fundraiser, and it's always a big thing. And this year they teamed up with the fair. And I should say that the North Coast Journal has some involvement in this. My boss, the owner of our paper, Melissa Sanderson, helped in the organizing of the chili cook-off. And also the company has on its marketing side a contract with the fair. So that said, and yet it really doesn't take much inside baseball to get me to a chili cook-off. And I mentioned this partly because it was fun sort of backstage watching my boss shuttle chili in and out of, it's always good watching your boss like shuttle lunch to people. It's fun. But anyway, Guy Fieri was, shepherding this whole thing, as the host of the day and bringing lots of Flavortown vibes to the event. And he was, of course, teasing and bantering and also giving the judges some really good tips on, how to taste chili, how to judge and assign a number to chili. And, it was all very much a lot of professionals on the field. There were restaurant folks, food truck folks. There were, the big winner of the day was the Bear River Casino, and they have, a whole team of people out there, professional cooks. But there was one guy whose chili and setup caught my eye, and that was Tim Jones. And he was representing Ace Hardware. And I went over and I was like, so where's the crew? What's going on? And he was like, just me.
I got to stop you right there because just to remind listeners and watchers that last week you had sort of a prescient feeling about this guy.
Well, it was good chili. He was over there and he told me, it's not in the article, but he was telling me that he purposely did his setup so that he would be chopping and everything up front. Most people are cooking sort of set back and presenting the chili up front, but he did all his chopping and everything up front. And you saw him cooking and whatnot and stirring pots. And I came by as he was dumping what seemed to be an armload of chopped smoked tri-tip into a big bubbling pot of chili. How could I leave? So, I got to talk with him during the competition, but then also afterward, because despite him being a one-man show and new at making chili, which kind of blew my mind, he and his sponsors, Ace Schaefer's Hardware, took home the Reserve Grand Championship, which is a fancy way of saying second place. And I gotta say, I personally preferred his chili. That's about personal taste. It's very thick and very hearty. It's not super spicy in the sense of heat, but it's full of spice and smoke, and it's full of real smoke from smoked peppers, smoked meat, etc., as opposed to liquid smoke, which I get it. Sometimes you need it. It's like dry shampoo. We all find ourselves in a moment where we need it, but is it the best? So it's a really, really nice chili. And when I was asking him about it, he was like, yeah, I made chili for the first time. And I was like, what? He made chili for the first time in July.
Wow.
And his wife was like, this is fantastic. You should enter this in a contest. I mean, my husband says this to me just to keep the peace in our home. But in fact, she meant it. And she knows what she's talking about because they are some kind of food power couple over there. Because Krista Jones has won this year 3 different blue ribbons for pie, for chocolate, mixed berry, and apple pie. So obviously I will be showing up unannounced at their home. But yeah, so she was like, you should do it. And he was saying, I don't know, it's a lot of money to enter. There's kind of a buy-in. And his boss at the hardware store, because he works there as a manager, was like, well, bring in some chili and I'll try it and we'll see. He brings in a pot of chili. The boss likes it. And now he's entered in a chili contest.
Wow.
That was the second pot of chili he'd ever made, right?
The second pot of chili he had ever made. Mind you, he comes from chili making royalty. His parents were competitive chili makers in the 80s. His father worked at a radio station and took part in lots of fundraisers and things. But he had never made his own chili, so it was still new to him, even though he's a big home cook, big barbecue guy. I mean, you work at a place where you get a discount on grills. How could you?
But it was in his DNA.
Exactly. Yeah. I think he was perhaps bred like a super soldier of chili making.
There you go. And now, what I want to know, Jen, is does the trophy have a pair of Oakleys worn backwards on its head?
I am sorry to say no. But it is nearly the size.
Disappointing. That's disappointing.
It's very close to Guy Fieri's actual height. The trophies in these things were so huge. Like, I thought you had to play hockey for a trophy this big. But in fact, you just have to make chili. And
who knew?
Yeah, and he won this thing with his 5th pot of chili in life.
Some people are just born lucky, I guess.
Born with the skills to pay the chili bills. And I'm very excited actually to try a variation of it, since he was really open, except for one secret ingredient, about his process, which involves smoking meat first and letting it rest and breaking down collagen and science.
Wow.
But
impressive.
It's good. And, his big thing was it has to be thick. For him, he's one of these people who wants to put it on a with a piece of cornbread to be able to float it in there without it getting soggy, or to be able to put chili on a hot dog and not have it fall off. And
that's my kind of chili right there. Yeah.
Right.
Now, Jen, in the 2 minutes that we have left, why don't you talk a little bit about the NCRT Midsummer Night's Sleep Perchance to Dream show coming up here?
Yes, NCRT, North Coast Repertoire Theater, finally brought some Shakespeare back to the stage, because for a minute they were looking a little bit cursed by the Scottish play, with COVID shutting them down twice for Hamlet. But they are back, and they have Midsummer Night's Dream, and Tigger Bouncer Custodio has a wonderful review of it. A wonderful read, but also very into it, which is not easy, because Tigger is very picky and does not like a pretentious Shakespeare play. But
that's what I've heard. I've heard that about it.
He may have mentioned. But this one is full of color and costuming. And, after being, a few years in my sweats in the house after COVID, it's nice to think I can go and see a really great take on Shakespeare that also has a velvet corseted jumpsuit and a floral gown that lights up.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, things are fancy and fun, and you really felt that the understanding of the material came through, and that they brought something really joyful forth. And it's a pleasure to go see, and I hope everybody will get the chance to see it this weekend.
Nice. All right, well, that's about all the time we have this week. North Coast Journal is on newsstands now. It's also available online 24/7. Pick up a copy, be informed, be entertained. Thad and Jennifer, thanks so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.